Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service here in Anchorage. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information from the National Weather Service serving your part of Alaska. You can do that anytime by calling 1-800-472-0391 or find us online at weather.gov/Alaska. If you're using your phone or your mobile device, try out the more bandwidth-friendly version of that at mobile.weather.gov. It's mobile.weather.gov. And then at the search bar at the top, type in your location, your city name, your village name, even try your zip code if you like, and then bookmark that, save that to your home page or your internet browser on your phone or mobile device, and you'll be able to use a much faster, slimmer, trimmer version of your Alaska National Weather Service site. If you can't find what you're looking for, whether it's got something to do with the aviation weather, the marine weather, the warnings or watches for your area, or just the general forecast information, feel free to use that email right there, david.snider@noaa.gov. I'm happy and privileged to serve you in any way that I can. Here's a look at the hazardous weather across Alaska tonight. Believe it or not, thunderstorms were forming and moving across the North Slope this morning. If you're in Prudhoe Bay toward Kaktovik, you've probably noticed a few of those blossoming over the region. This line of shower and thunderstorm activity is stretching out across the northern Yukon. And as this moves eastward, winds are coming in behind it. So right now, while we don't have any warnings out for the thunderstorm activity, it's always a good idea to move away and inside from those thunderstorms, getting away from the lightning threat there and staying away from electrical equipment for about 30 minutes or so until after that storm has passed. Behind that, though, the warning that you see is for high winds. High winds up to 50 miles an hour coming in behind the weather could last through tonight and tomorrow, so be prepared for some strong and gusty winds for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. A high wind warning in effect there now, and that's expected to continue as we go through your 4th of July, Independence Day. Let's take a look at the fire danger. That's really the most critical part of the weather we have as we go through the next several days. Extreme to at least high fire danger is found across the central and eastern parts of the interior, as well as the middle and upper Yukon and parts of the Kotzebue Sound region and into the northern sections of the Seward Peninsula. Dry conditions are expected to continue. We do not see any widespread rainfall moving through the interior anytime soon. The best threat we would have would be from shower and thunderstorm development in the afternoon. So let's take a look and see what we have today. You cannot see that line of thunderstorms here across the North Slope on this particular satellite picture, but we'll check another one here in a minute. You can see the southern edge of that extent, though, as it moves into the northern and central parts of the Yukon. Out across the Gulf, very flat, smooth clouds seen there, that layer of stratus and maybe even some fog under some parts of high pressure as that's working across south and east. You can see the drier effects of that weather pattern there. A beautiful day in parts of southeast. Low pressure forming out west, though, aiming to change things up as we go. Here's another loop of the visible satellite picture, and you can see the next band of cloud cover already working its way into southwestern Alaska, bringing rain to parts of Bristol Bay, the Alaska Peninsula, and the eastern chain. South Central coming out right in between. Looks like most of the southern interior and a large part of inland southwestern Alaska, as well as the Kenai Peninsula. Just seeing a beautiful Alaska day. I hope you are enjoying it. Up north, here comes that wave of weather now. This blob of clouds was responsible for the shower and thunderstorm activity that we're seeing today. Generally a rare sight across parts of the North Slope. So if you were a little shocked, hopefully not shocked literally, but if you were somewhat behaviorally shocked, let's say, about the rain and thunder moving through, then that would be for good reason. It is not an everyday occurrence for sure. Wrapping into low pressure here across the western chain is our next weather maker, and as this slides eastward, it will bring an increasing threat for rain and maybe even some thunderstorm activities we get toward the end of the week. In the meantime, today, not the case for south central, southwest, or the interior. A beautiful Chamber of Commerce day. A trough of low pressure across southeast, also drawing in some offshore winds. Things fairly nice there. There's the line of rain and thunder stretching into the North Slope from the Yukon. High pressure across Norton Sound, relatively high for high pressure in the summer, 1,036 millibars there, a stable area of air, and low pressure out west, trying to change things up, and you can see that wave and its triple point where the cold air, the warm air, and where it all mashes up together, the occlusion, moving through the Alaska Peninsula as we go through this afternoon. High pressure will continue dropping southward, allowing this next wave of weather to creep north and east. Underneath that, stable air may trap some areas of the wildfire smoke across the interior. That's what the smokestack with a squiggly line indicates there, if you're wondering. Across the north, cold front dropping into the northwestern coastline and eventually Kotzebue Sound. Mainly we'll have rain and some areas of fog with it, but a careful eye will notice that I've changed the color just behind that. The pink shade, of course, if you're a faithful watcher of Alaska weather, you know that is a mixture of rain and snow, so it is cold enough for mixed precipitation to fall fairly close to the coast. You can barely see the coastline right here. We're going to keep most of that offshore, but if you see a snowflake mixing with a rainfall, don't be too surprised there. It's going to be close. Areas of light rain and snow, probably well away from the eastern Beaufort Sea coast initially, but watch for some areas of fog there. Showers mostly staying out of southeastern Alaska, and a better chance for some light rain across most of the YK Delta coastline and eventually into the interior there as we get into Wednesday. You can see a lot of that staying south of the Alaska Range. There might be a shower or thunderstorm firing up in the vicinity of the Talkeetnas and the eastern Alaska Range, perhaps Arctic Village as we get into Wednesday, your Independence Day. Light rain, drizzle, and some areas of fog for the North Slope. Some of that stretching into the Kotzebue Sound region. And once again, that rain and snow mix trying to work its way southward closer to the Beaufort Sea coast, but looks like a lot of that's probably going to stay out over the ice. Shower and thunderstorm activity will be isolated if we see it at all across southeast. Notice I didn't paint in any rainfall across parts of southeast as well. We don't really think we're going to see any widespread precipitation, but it is going to be possible tomorrow with the weather that we could see an isolated tower or two develop there. So if you're flying around or if you're just out and enjoying the fine weather there on the water, make sure you're paying attention to what the clouds are doing. The first sign of thunder and lightning, head into safe port, safe harbor, and make sure you're okay. Get away from thunder and lightning at least for 30 minutes until it goes away. Showers behind this wave across southwest will continue, looking for some light rain across the chain. And for Thursday, slightly better chance for more widespread shower and storm activity across the southern interior and south central. A better chance for showers across the Kenai than anything else. The cold weather stays up north. You can see that boundary line shaping up there with a stationary front. And out west, high pressure is still in charge of the Bering Sea, especially in the north. We could see some areas of fog with that, and a better chance for some developing light rain across the central and western Aleutians, with a threat for a little bit of light rainfall across extreme southern parts of southeast. Let's take a look at your temperatures quickly. A mild night for everyone going into the 4th. 40s and 50s abound. The exceptions would be from about Utqiagvik and Barrow out toward Wainwright. Temps there only in the mid-30s, otherwise 40s and 50s all around. High temperatures on Wednesday afternoon back in the mid to upper 70s. Not going to be surprised to see 80s across some parts of the interior as we go into the 4th. 30s around Barrow, Utqiagvik, out toward Wainwright again. 70s and 80s for parts of southeast. A blistering hot day for southeast. 50s as we get into Thursday morning. Many sections will also follow suit there. A little bit cooler in Nome and just south of the Brooks Range. 30s for the North Slope as we get into your Thursday morning. 40s and 50s out west. And as we get into Thursday afternoon, back to work. Temperatures back in the mid to upper 70s, closing in on 80 degrees once again for parts of southeast. Upper 60s to even mid to upper 70s across a large part of the interior and south central.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to aviation weather now. IFR conditions are expected to hold very close to the Arctic coast and through most of the Bering Sea. Look for parts of Bristol Bay up toward Cape Newenham to see IFR conditions to start through the Bering Strait and the western end of St. Lawrence Island, and then generally over and west of St. Matthew and over St. Paul and St. George. All of the Aleutians will start out under IFR conditions, as well as the southern end of Kodiak Island and most of the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula. Notice most of the Gulf and most of southeast, really, and most of the interior and south central looking pretty good with a VFR start for your Wednesday, the 4th of July. And showers and thunderstorms may develop in the afternoon heat. Some of that could be found across parts of southeast for your Wednesday afternoon, Independence Day, and of course across the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range and maybe over some of the western end of the Copper River Valley and into the Talkeetnas and parts of the northern edge of South Central. So we'll be watching for the potential of growth into the afternoon. Make sure you check the weather before you're heading out if you're doing some Independence Day flying. Across southwestern Alaska, IFR conditions will prevail. It looks like that will start to sneak its way in to the interior just a little bit more as we get into the afternoon. A little bit of a change for Kodiak Island, perhaps some improvement down toward AKwx and through the Aleutian Chain and the Pribilofs. Not much of a change, though, for the North Slope, with MVFR actually working its way southward a little bit across some of the western Brooks Range as we get into the afternoon on the 4th. For Thursday morning, IFR conditions worsen up north. You'll see a few holes here and there to MVFR, but it does look like a bulk of IFR generally north of the Brooks Range summits. For southeast, VFR conditions should prevail. Notice the IFR spreading inland just a little bit more across the southwest coast and into Norton Sound, though you may see some VFR pockets there. Some of that could be fairly close to the Nome to Deering region in the eastern Norton Sound, and IFR continues out west for the afternoon. Not a big change for the Bering Sea coast. Showers and thunderstorms could be widely scattered across the Alaska Range and northward into just about the middle Tanana Valley and eastward to around Eagle and Northway, with southeast still prevailing under VFR conditions. IFR, though, starting to develop out across the Gulf. Here's your pass conditions for your Wednesday, the 4th of July. VFR conditions expected for Anaktuvuk and Adigan Pass. We expect to see Lake Clark and Merrill Pass leaning over toward marginal conditions as your day goes on. Rainy Pass expected to see VFR conditions throughout all of the 4th, as well as Windy Pass. Isabel Pass looking pretty good at this point, and it looks like Mentasta Pass should hold at VFR through Wednesday. As we get into Tanita Pass, no big changes southward, but again, we're going to watch for a few showers and storms in the vicinity. And as we get up to Portage Pass, VFR conditions expected there, and Chilcoot and White Pass, we've actually added risk for some shower and thunderstorm activity in the region there. So keep watch on those billowing clouds. As we get into Wednesday morning, freezing levels are way up there, anywhere from 8 to about 10, even 12,000 feet as you get down toward Kodiak Island and just east of the Pribilofs through the eastern Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. In fact, some levels there just west of Sand Point to about Cold Bay and Falls Pass are up above 14,000 feet. So the air is warm, no question about it. Enjoy your few days of summer, especially across the north, the interior, and the west. Now, as we get into the next couple days, icing potential may start to return, but for right now, levels are pretty high up there, up above 10,000 feet or so. There is an opportunity for some isolated moderate across the North Slope, just north of the Brooks Range summits, as well as the middle and lower Yukon Valley. And again, we're going to watch for a few of those thunderstorms to pop up in the afternoon, which implies an isolated but severe icing threat, and that could include parts of southeast tomorrow. The jet stream has a ridge of high pressure sitting just south of most of Alaska across the northern Pacific. Those south and westerly winds coming in around 90 knots over the eastern Aleutians and then taking a nosedive into the Gulf, helping to keep things pretty clear and quiet across most of the Gulf. And that's encouraging some fair weather for many parts of the interior, south central, and southeast. But we know that things are changing a little bit out west when we start to see a digging trough and a stronger subtropical jet stream pushing in around 110 knots coming off the coast of eastern Asia. So we're going to start to watch for a developing trough here in the west and for this ridge to move on out of the way. In the meantime, tomorrow, not the case. So it looks like a westerly flow over Bristol Bay. Northerlies coming off of southeast, anywhere from 5 to 20 knots. Looking for a generally westerly flow coming across the interior. Pretty quiet weather there. Stronger winds, though, across the North Slope, around 40 knots at 9,000 feet. At 3,000 feet, they're a little lighter, 35 to 40 knots. And again, high pressure setting up across, well, pretty close to McGrath, looking at more of a light offshore flow over parts of the YK Delta and light westerlies over most of southwest Alaska. And then you can see her developing low out in the west. What about turbulence? Pretty limited stuff. There will be some chop over the Brooks Range and out across the central and western chain, generally below 4,000 feet. Back with your marine weather in a moment. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and joining me once again is Eric Stevens from the Geographic Information Network of Alaska, or GINA, based at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. Eric, welcome back to the show.
Well, Dave, it's great to be back. Thanks for inviting us again.
Sure thing. And today we want to talk about identifying burn scars. That would be the burned up area after a wildfire when the flames and the smoke are gone. We can see it if you drive by it on the roadway, of course, but from satellite, we can also identify those places on the land, right?
You know it. You know that expression, ouch, that's going to leave a mark?
Yeah.
After you bang your knee getting out of the car. You go,
Oh yeah.
Well, the ouch, it's going to leave a mark, that also applies to the landscape. Whenever a wildfire ravages through, it's going to leave a mark on the landscape. After a wildfire burns out, this is called a burn scar.
Okay.
And you can ask yourself, well, that's interesting. We can see a burn scar from space. Then the question is, well, why does that matter?
Okay.
Who cares?
Yeah, fire's over.
Right, the fire is over. We don't need to worry about this anymore. It turns out you kind of do, because burn scars are important. There's this old rule of thumb in the weather business that flood follows fire.
Okay.
The action of the fire in killing off the vegetation, in baking, kiln drying the landscape a little bit, can hinder the land's ability to absorb rainfall. So if you have a fire, especially if it's in complex mountainous terrain.
Right.
This is classic in California. It can happen somewhat in Alaska too. You get a wildfire in steep, hilly, or mountainous terrain, rips off all the vegetation off the landscape. Then 6 months later, there's a big rainstorm, and you get a flash flood in that area. So flood can follow fire. That's why you got to know where the burn scars are. Secondly, a fire needs fuel to maintain itself. So if there's an old burn scar left over from a year or two ago, and then another summer later here in Alaska in the interior, it's a big wildfire season. If there's a fire advancing toward an old burn scar, well, guess what? That old burn scar is going to be tougher terrain for that new fire to get through, because there's not as much fuel in that burn scar. So they almost act like a natural fire break. These are a couple of reasons why you need to know where those burn scars are. Alaska Fire Service has limited resources. They want to put their people and their equipment where it does the most good. They need to know, well, this is an area where there's no burn scar. We better put people here because that fire could really run.
So really important for weather forecasters and fire weather forecasters for sure.
Oh yeah.
But then how do weather satellites actually detect those burn scars?
Ah, good question.
Thanks.
Well, let's turn the Wayback Machine to the summer of 2015. That was a very active year. Got a picture here taken up in the White Mountains. This is one of the fires in progress that summer, and if you look real close, you can almost see Frodo throwing the ring into the volcano there. So that's quite the vision. Well, let's look at a visible image. Here we are in Alaska's interior. This is before the fires got out of the cage in early summer of 2015. Let's zoom into the western interior here. Again, this is a weather satellite image of visible light, what the human eye can see. We're into the middle reach of the Yukon Valley there in the western interior, Galena area. And this is just a beautiful visible day. Nothing much going on. It's in early June before the fires really got active. But then in 2015, the fires got loose, especially in that western interior. Here's another image. The same satellite pass as that visible image, but now we're not quite looking at visible light.
Very different.
There's a slight change here. This image incorporates something called the veggie band. 0.86 micron wavelength. The micron's very tiny, but that wavelength responds to vegetation, the chlorophyll. So trees and grasses reflect that part of the electromagnetic spectrum back to the satellite. And so the satellite sees that. When signal comes at that wavelength to the satellite, we know, there's some vegetation growing there. This is great. You can identify coastlines so easily because you go from vegetation to water. Turns out if you have a burn scar, guess what? You burned away the vegetation, so that's going to show up. We're going to do a before, during, and after kind of look here. And so we're looking at before. So in this image, we got a lot of green out there. That's wonderful. Another fun thing about this kind of imagery is you can see down in the Alaska Range in the southeast corner of the image, it's blue. That's glaciers and snow in the mountains. So this is not really what the human eye can see. This is these wavelengths are beyond human vision, but we've made them look certain colors. So the vegetation looks green. Now let's look at that same kind of satellite recipe, but during the fires. This is in July. The fires are loose. You can see the smoke in the middle of the image, the smearing look of the smoke, and then we can see some clouds that are white. Icy clouds are blue. So this is in July of 2015. The fires are doing their thing. We're burning up millions of acres. Now let's go to September. The fires are out. The audience has left the theater. You know, the event's over, right? We're done. But guess what? Now look at those brown patches.
Look at that.
All of those places are where the fire has burned away the vegetation. So you can see where the fires were. You can add up these perimeters, get acreage burned and such. And so that's good to know. Now remember, flood follows fire, and these are also natural fire breaks. So you need to know where these guys are. In the course of the 2015 summer season, we went from before with not much burn scar in this area to just a couple months later, we can see so much burn scarring on the landscape. What's interesting too about the satellite and looking at burn scars is you realize that burn scars are the gift that keeps on giving. You can forget that a couple of years ago, maybe there was a fire in a certain area, but the satellite won't forget. So in the summertime, we get wildfires in Alaska, but guess what? In the visible imagery here, we can see the burn scars just a little bit, but they're not as prominent as in that veggie band. But then you can't see them at all if you cover them up with snow, right?
Exactly.
So here's an image from the middle of the winter time, and snow on the ground by this recipe looks blue. Again, these are wavelengths of light that the human eye can't really see. We're getting up into the infrared, near infrared, and the way we've assigned colors is if there's snow on the ground or there's a glacier, it looks blue, kind of intuitive. So this is early April of the following year, 2016. We're just about to get into breakup. We got a lot of snow on the ground, and now it's all going to melt. And as the snow melts, then you get our final image here. Doesn't this look familiar? This looks like a lot of what we saw in September of the previous summer. So this is the spring of the next year. The fires themselves might not have overwintered, they're gone, but the fire scar does. And as the snow melts away, and then you have breakup, and then you have green up, whenever the leaves come out, the grass comes back, except in the burned areas, they're having a tough time because everything got burned off the previous year. So you can see these scars even the next summer, multiple years. It depends on what kind of vegetation there is. You know, some of the tussocky tundra grasses, they'll grow back really quick, but to get a forest to come back, that'll take much longer. So these burn scars, eventually the landscape will fill in the burn scar. It will heal itself, if you want to use that metaphor. But for the next few years, you can still keep track of these on satellite. And again, the reason we want to do that is that the burn scar can facilitate a flood, and it can act like a fire break. So there you are, the
fascinating tools. So if you're a weather satellite and you're looking at my bowl of vegetables here, you might be able to pick out which one's the pea, which one's the tomato, and which one's the carrot, and apply that information precisely to whatever it is you're working on there. That is really fascinating stuff, that we have that capability from so high above the planet Earth, and Alaska for that matter.
Yep, eat your veggies.
Yes, definitely. I think I will. I'm hungry. Thanks so much for joining us again, Eric, and thank you for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. We'll see you right here next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Moving on to your marine weather now, the sea ice edge today is showing more of the melting across the Chukchi coast. You can start to see some more open leads north of Utqiagvik and Barrow out toward Wainwright and into the central and northern Chukchi Sea. There's still kind of a peninsula of ice that's slowly melting in place. This edge is eroding northward there as we get more warm water into the region as well as warm air. You'll also start to see a few more changes here across the east as we get into some strong winds from the west over the next day or so before we get into more of a northerly flow once again. The latest sea ice edge is available anytime for your inspection at weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Check the latest forecast there as well as the seasonal outlook while you're on that page. Let's take a look at the marine forecast now for southeast. Winds will continue to blow out of the north through the Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3-foot seas expected for your daytime tomorrow. On the 4th, north and northwesterlies remain light across the Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait region. A west and northwesterly flow running parallel to the coast expected across the outer coast for 15 to 20 knots or so, looking for about 4 to 5-foot seas there on Wednesday. Not a big change there on Thursday. We'll see southerlies develop across the Lynn Canal, 15 knots and 3-foot seas there. Winds remain generally light across the inside passage with seas holding around the 2-foot level, and west and northwesterlies continue across the outer coast, expecting about 10 to 15 knots there with a 4 to 5-foot sea on Thursday. In south central, Prince William Sound looking fine. A southwesterly flow at 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Seas a little bit higher outside, anywhere from 6 to 7-foot seas across the north and western Gulf. Southwest flow continues over the Barrens around 20 knots, and that southerly flow up Cook Inlet should reach about 15 to 20 knots, expecting about 3 to 5-foot seas there on your 4th of July. By Thursday, the winds start to pick up a little bit more out of the west, coming off of the Aleutian Range and out of Lake Iliamna. 25 to 30 knots there over the Barrens, 6 to 8 foot seas. Winds still light and favorable across Prince William Sound. Easterlies 10 knots and 2 foot seas there. Outside, though, slightly stronger winds outside of Montague Island, 15 knots from the south and 25 knots outside of Resurrection Bay over the open Gulf. 25 knots will bring you about 6 foot seas there on your Thursday. Across Bristol Bay, westerlies will get you 20 knots. 5 foot seas expected there with a south and westerly flow. Stronger winds over the North Pacific, though, and into Kodiak Island, about 10 to 20 knots with a 5 to 6 foot sea. Inside of Shelikof Strait, southwesterlies, 20 knots with 5 foot seas expected there. For your Thursday, winds holding around 15 to 25 knots in the entire region. 5 foot seas inside of Bristol Bay. Smaller seas as you head down the Bering Sea coast toward Cold Bay. Look for westerlies across the North Pacific, holding at 20 to 25 knots. 5 to 7 foot seas expected there, and 5 foot seas inside of Shelikof Strait, with winds holding around 25 knots. For the Aleutians, expect a broad southerly flow, generally about 15 to 20 knots or so. 5 to 6 foot seas in the central and eastern chain. Slightly higher seas as you move into the Pacific coast at 7 to 8. Out west, 7 to 8 foot seas there on the 20 knot wind, also from the south as we get into Thursday. Not a big change there. 10 to 15 knot winds for the central and eastern coast. 5 to 6 foot seas most areas. 3 foot seas, in fact, even better as you get north of Unalaska to Nikolsky, and south and southeasterly winds developing ahead of the next fetch, with 6 to 7 foot seas expected from Adak to Kiska and out toward Shemya on Thursday. For the west coast, westerly onshore flow will bring you about 10 to 15 knot winds, expecting 3 to 4 foot seas most areas, smaller seas inside of Norton Sound, and slightly higher seas around St. Matthew Island. On that 10 knot wind, you'll get 6 foot seas there Wednesday. For Thursday, light wind out of the north over St. Lawrence Island into Nunivak Island and Macoriac, looking at that west and southwesterly flow. Expecting a little bit more of a west and southwesterly flow from St. Paul to St. George and into the Kuskokwim Delta region. 3 to 4 foot seas on a 15 knot wind there. For Wednesday in the North Slope, look for stronger westerly winds. Remember, we've got a high wind warning out now for the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Winds up there 25 to 30 knots from the west, and an onshore flow for the Chukchi Sea 20 to 25 knots for your Independence Day. Look for westerlies across the North Slope to continue on your Thursday, 15 to as strong as 40 knots across the eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Again, a high wind warning in effect through your Thursday. Recapping tonight's weather, a cold front is dropping southward. The pressure gradient will be picking up here. We've had some shower and thunderstorm activity across the North Slope today. That is trending eastward, so it will be moving out of your region slowly and surely this afternoon and this evening. Light rain across southwest, some smoke across the interior, of course, across the vicinity of those wildfires. Watch for areas of fog and light rain to continue across the North Slope as we get into your Wednesday. Slight chance for a shower or thunderstorm across southeast. Most of that will be very isolated and maybe across the eastern Alaska range. The showers continue out across southwest. As we get into Thursday, a better chance for more widely scattered shower and storm activity across parts of south central's higher terrain. Maybe a shower across the Kenai Peninsula, and cooler weather stays to the north. Have a happy 4th.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.